The clock on the dashboard glowed 2 a.m. Arsalan gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white in the dim light. The Sansan highway stretched before him, a black ribbon winding through the desolate landscape. He was alone, swallowed by the immensity of the night. The only sounds were the low hum of his car engine and the rush of wind against the windows. The headlights cut through the darkness, revealing only the empty road ahead. Every shadow seemed to writhe, taking on monstrous shapes that flickered at the edge of his vision. A chill ran down Arsalan's spine, and he turned up the heater, hoping to chase away the growing unease. Arsalan had been driving for hours, eager to reach his destination. He had taken this route as a shortcut, ignoring the warnings of locals who whispered of strange occurrences on this lonely stretch of highway. Now, enveloped by the oppressive silence, he began to regret his decision. Each mile felt longer than the last, each bend in the road promising something sinister. Headlights flashed, momentarily blinding Arsalan. The night was thick with an eerie silence, broken only by the hum of his car engine. He squinted, his foot hovering over the brake pedal, unsure of what lay ahead. A figure emerged from the darkness, silhouetted against the faint glow of the moon. The shadows seemed to dance around it, making it hard to discern any details. It was a woman, her hand raised as if flagging him down. Her movements were slow, almost hesitant, as if she was unsure whether to approach. Arsalan slowed, his heart pounding in his chest like a drum. The closer he got, the more his anxiety grew. A wave of apprehension washed over him. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Something about her felt off, the way she stood, shrouded in shadow, her face obscured by the darkness. It was as if the night itself was trying to hide her true form. His instincts screamed at him to drive on, to leave her stranded in the night. Every fiber of his being urged him to keep going. Yet a flicker of compassion ignited within him. He thought of all the times he had needed help, and found none. He couldn't bear the thought of leaving someone stranded at this hour. The idea gnawed at his conscience, making it impossible to ignore. "It's just a ride," he muttered to himself, attempting to quell his unease. He took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. He pulled over to the shoulder, the car's headlights illuminating the woman more clearly. The light revealed more details, but also deepened the mystery. She was young, perhaps in her early 20s, with long dark hair that cascaded down her back. Her hair seemed to shimmer in the artificial light. She wore a simple white dress, its fabric clinging to her slender frame. The dress looked out of place, too delicate for the harshness of the night. Her eyes, wide and pleading, seemed to pierce through him. They held a depth of emotion that made his heart ache. "Thank you, sir," she breathed, her voice barely a whisper. "You're a lifesaver." Her gratitude was palpable, yet there was an underlying tone of desperation that he couldn't ignore. She slid into the passenger seat, bringing with her a chill that seemed to seep into Arsalan's bones. He tried to ignore the prickling sensation on the back of his neck, the way the air in the car suddenly felt heavy, suffocating. "Which way are you headed?" he asked, his voice strained. "Just down the road," she replied, her voice barely audible above the hum of the engine. Her gaze was fixed straight ahead, her eyes reflecting an emptiness that sent a shiver down Arsalan's spine. He tried to make conversation to break the unnerving silence, but his attempts were met with monosyllabic responses. With each passing mile, the woman seemed to grow more and more ethereal. Her features, once seemingly normal, now appeared blurry, indistinct. Her presence filled the car not with warmth, but with an icy dread that sent chills down Arsalan's spine. He gripped the steering wheel tighter, his knuckles turning white, his mind racing with unsettling thoughts he couldn't quite grasp. Arsalan glanced at his passenger, his heart leaping into his throat. The woman was gone. 1 minute she was there, her presence palpable in its unsettling stillness. The next she had vanished into thin air. He slammed on the brakes, the car skidding to a halt on the deserted highway. His breath came in ragged gasps as he frantically searched the car, his eyes scanning the empty passenger seat, the floorboards, the back seat. There was no sign of her. It was as if she had never been there at all. A wave of dizziness washed over Arsalan. Had he imagined the entire encounter? Was the isolation, the lateness of the hour, playing tricks on his mind? He shook his head, trying to dispel the rising panic. He had seen her, felt her presence, the unnatural chill that clung to her like a shroud. He couldn't have imagined it. Section 5. A glimmer in the rear view. Arsalan gripped the steering wheel, his heart pounding against his ribs. He convinced himself it had been a hallucination, a trick of the mind in the dead of night. He tried to start the car, to put as much distance as possible between himself and the unsettling experience. As he glanced at his rearview mirror, he noticed he noticed something that made his blood run cold. Standing in the middle of the road, bathed in the eerie glow of the taillights, was the woman. Her white dress shimmered in the darkness, her long dark hair billowed around her like a funeral shroud. Her face, once again obscured by shadow, held a look of unspeakable sadness. Terror, raw and primal, surged through Arsalan. He threw the car into gear, accelerating away from the apparition. He didn't dare look back. His mind flooded with images of the woman's sorrowful eyes, the unnatural chill that had permeated the car during her brief presence. Section 6. Seeking refuge, finding fear. Arsalan sped down the highway, his knuckles white as he gripped the steering wheel. The night was eerily quiet, the only sound being the hum of the engine and the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. He pushed the car faster, desperate to escape the chilling presence that haunted his rearview mirror. Every glance back sent shivers down his spine. The ghostly figure's eyes seemed to bore into his soul. The dark and silent landscape whipped past, a blur of shadows and moonlight. The trees seemed to reach out with skeletal branches, adding to the sense of dread that filled the air. He didn't slow down, couldn't bear the thought of stopping until he reached civilization. The fear of what might happen if he stopped was too great, driving him to keep going despite the fatigue setting in. The sight of lights in the distance sparked a flicker of hope in Arsalan's chest. It was a sign of safety, a promise of refuge from the terror that pursued him. As he drew closer, he saw the familiar beacon of a police checkpoint. The flashing lights were a welcome sight, a signal that he was no longer alone in the dark. Relief washed over him, a tangible wave that momentarily pushed back the fear. He felt a glimmer of safety, a brief respite from the relentless chase. He pulled up to the checkpoint, his body trembling with adrenaline and terror. The car's engine idled, a stark contrast to the pounding of his heart. A lone officer approached his car, his expression wary. The officer's eyes scanned the surroundings, as if sensing the tension in the air. "Is everything all right, sir?" he asked, his hand resting on his holster. The officer's voice was calm but firm, a professional demeanor masking any personal concern. Arsalan, his voice shaky and breathless, recounted his experience. The ghostly hitchhiker, her sudden disappearances, her haunting reappearance in the rearview mirror. Each word he spoke seemed to lift a weight off his chest, though the fear lingered. The officer listened patiently, his expression shifting from skepticism to concern as Arsalan's tale unfolded. The change in the officer's demeanor gave Arsalan a small measure of comfort, knowing that he was being taken seriously. Section 7. Unveiling the past. The officer, a grizzled man with years of service etched into his face, listened intently to Arsalan's story. His eyes, shadowed by the weight of countless tales, never wavered as Arsalan recounted the eerie events of the night. When he finished, a heavy silence settled over them. The room seemed to hold its breath, the air thick with the gravity of the revelation. The officer's eyes held a mixture of pity and understanding, a look that suggested he had heard similar tales before. It was a look that spoke of shared pain and unspoken stories, a silent acknowledgement of the supernatural. "This highway," he began, his voice low and grave, "has a dark history." His words seemed to echo in the stillness, each syllable laden with the weight of the past. 20 years ago, a young woman was killed in a hit-and-run accident just a few miles from here. The tragedy had cast a long shadow over the area, a shadow that seemed to grow darker with each passing year. She was on her way to meet her fiancé, wearing her wedding dress. Arsalan's blood ran cold, the image of the bride so full of hope and love now forever marred by the cruel twist of fate. The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place, the woman's sorrowful eyes, her ethereal presence, the white dress that shimmered in the darkness. It all made sense now, the haunting vision that had gripped his soul. He was witnessing the lingering sorrow of a soul seeking closure, a soul trapped between worlds, unable to move on until justice was served. "They say," the officer continued, "that her spirit still wanders this road, searching for the driver who left her to die." The legend had become a part of the local lore, a chilling reminder of the past. His words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken implications. The silence that followed was almost palpable, a testament to the weight of the story. Arsalan shuddered, the weight of the ghostly encounter settling upon him like a shroud. The reality of the spectral bride and her tragic tale was now a part of his own story, a haunting memory that would stay with him forever. Section 8. A promise made, a path avoided. Arsalan sat in stunned silence, the officer's words echoing in his ears. The reality of his encounter sunk in, leaving a residue of fear and sorrow in its road, searching for the driver who left her to die. The legend had become a part of the local lore, a chilling reminder of the past. His words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken implications. The silence that followed was almost palpable, a testament to the weight of the story. Arsalan shuddered, the weight of the ghostly encounter settling upon him like a shroud. The reality of the spectral bride and her tragic tale was now a part of his own story, a haunting memory that would stay with him forever. Section 8, a promise made, a path avoided. Arsalan sat in stunned silence, the officer's words echoing in his ears. The reality of his encounter sunk in, leaving a residue of fear and sorrow in its wake. He realized he hadn't just encountered a ghost, he had crossed paths with a tragedy left unresolved. The officer, his expression a mix of sympathy and resignation, patted Arsalan's arm. "You're safe now, son," he said reassuringly. "But let this be a lesson. Some roads are best left untraveled, especially after midnight." As dawn broke, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink, Arsalan continued his journey. He left the Sansan highway behind, his heart heavy with the weight of the ghostly encounter. He knew he would never forget the sorrowful eyes of the woman in white, a haunting reminder of the tragedy that lingered on that lonely stretch of road. He vowed to never travel that way again, his path forever altered by the chilling tale of the Sansan highway.